Welcome to Lesson 1 in Unit 10, Saving the Sand Dunes. In this lesson, students will work together to answer the question, what are sand dunes and why are they important? In this lesson, students are introduced to the Sleeping Bear Dunes and how they are changing. Students figure out that the sand dunes are important because they provide habitats and barriers along the lake, and they have cultural importance. They define the problem that the sand dunes changing might change animal habitats, weaken or destroy protection, and impact cultural importance. Students make connections to the storyline by gathering evidence to begin to construct why the changing sand dunes might be a problem. There are several opportunities for ELA and social studies cross-curricular connections throughout the lesson. You can look for specific standard connections in the Unit 10 Teacher Guide. This lesson will take approximately 4 days to complete. To begin the Engage portion, you'll introduce the anchoring problem. The Sleeping Bear Dunes are changing. You'll visit the Sleeping Bear Dunes on Google Earth and click through the provided photos. You'll then orient students to where the dunes are located, along Lake Michigan. You'll ask what they notice about the images and to share any prior knowledge of sand dunes, beaches, or sand. Students will find the anchoring problem more compelling if they can connect to it personally. If you want to change the anchoring problem for your context, keep the following questions in mind. Is it going to be relevant to my students' lives and/or particularly engaging to them? By researching online, you can find a beach or shore near your community to use as the subject of the unit. Though a sandy area near a body of water might be easiest, any land area that is changing over time due to wind and water can work. Is it going to motivate my students to want to explain how wind and water change the earth over time, how these changes can occur slowly or quickly, or how solutions can be designed to prevent changes to the land? You'll then play video clips of the Sleeping Bear Dunes. You'll show students the infographic about the dunes and ask them to think of one thing they notice and one thing they wonder about. You'll allow students to turn and talk to discuss their observations. As students are sharing their observations and questions, provide them with the sentence stem, "Now I'm wondering about," to model how they can use observations to develop questions. Once students have their questions, you will guide them in creating the class driving question board, using the steps provided in the teacher guide. Do not answer questions at this time or correct student thinking. They will explore their questions and explain this anchoring problem throughout the unit. For example, if a student says something incorrect, you can say, "How could we figure that out?" Here are examples of driving question boards from other K-5 units. They depict the students' questions in categories, some along with a drawn model from the unit. Some driving question boards are simple lists of questions or groups of sticky notes posted on chart paper. Teachers and students can manipulate and move around questions and label categories together. You'll then project the engineering design cycle for the students and let them know that they're going to use it to solve a problem about the Sleeping Bear Dunes. You'll allow students to turn and talk about how they can use the cycle, then share a few answers with the whole class. For the Explore portion, you'll have students work in partners to read the Sand Dunes magazine article. The article explains what sand dunes are and why they are important. You'll then have students use the Intro to Sleeping Bear Dunes student journal page to draw or write about the dunes. In the Explain portion of the lesson, students will engage in a class discussion to share their findings from the sand dune research. Use the provided questions to guide your discussion around the question, what are sand dunes and why are they important? The goal of this class discussion is to identify and build a class consensus as to why sand dunes are important and why we might not want them to change. You will use the discussion to create the Lesson 1 summary chart. From the discussion, students should understand that the dunes are getting smaller and that could cause problems for animals and the environment. You can post and discuss the sand dune and habitat vocabulary cards. For the Elaborate portion, you'll introduce the book The Legend of Sleeping Bear. You'll let the students know a legend is a story of cultural importance, usually explaining a phenomenon. This is an indigenous legend about the region, and it has cultural significance for many people. Use the Read Aloud Guide to read the book and discuss with students. You'll then play the Legend of Sleeping Bear National Park's video to help students connect their ideas back to the importance of the dunes. You'll then lead a short class discussion to update the Lesson 1 summary chart with new information. From the discussion, students should understand that the dunes getting smaller could cause problems for animals and the environment, as well as people. For the Evaluate portion, you'll have students use their Importance of Sleeping Bear Dunes student journal page to answer the final question. To support student sense-making across the unit, orient them back to the driving question board. Ask, what did we learn about what sand dunes are and why they are important? And what new questions do we have? By the end of this lesson, students will have asked questions to gather information about the changing sand dunes, and gathered information to define the problem caused by the changing sand dunes. In Lesson 2, students will begin to research why the dunes are changing to determine what is causing them to change. For more information about this unit, visit myscipartners.com.